Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thanks for joining us, for joining me and a guest you're going to meet here in a moment. My name is John Cook. I'm the CEO of VMLY&R. I was about 23 years as John Cook from VML, and a couple years ago we added a couple letters to that, and I'm still getting used to saying John Cook from VMLY&R. So that's me, and good to see everybody. We're going to talk today about the transformation of brands, and there's not a better brand to talk about than Wendy's. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Wendy's maybe 10 plus years ago was getting a little tired, maybe a little stale in some areas, in need of a little bit of a reimagination into culture, and things changed, and things changed quickly. And our special guest here is going to talk about that. But in the last 10 years, especially, Wendy's has become not only great, but it's become literally the best QSR in the history of the universe. And that's a big accomplishment, and a lot of that goes to our special guest, Cain. So a little bit about Kurt. Kurt and I met and have been friends since 2015 or so. That's when he joined Wendy's. He joined from Pizza Hut. He was let's see if I get all the titles right, he was the Global Chief Marketing Officer, and Food Innovation Officer. One of the hardest things about this intro is getting all of Kurt's titles correct, because there's a lot of them, they're very powerful. Kurt joined as the Chief Marketing Officer and Food Innovation Officer of Wendy's. I'm probably getting that wrong too, but and in the last many years, one of the things he's done is worked a lot with the VMLY&R team. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But in the last couple of years, Kurt's become the president of Wendy's and the Chief Commercial Officer as well, and his remit has grown every month that I've known Kurt. He's a very busy man: marketing, culinary, operations, brand transformation, digital experience, you name it, so much more. We'll talk about all that. But without further ado, joining us from Dublin, Ohio, Cain, welcome to the show.
All right. Well, John, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Like I said, my most nerve-wracking moment was trying to get all those titles within 80% correct. How'd I do?
I think you did a great job. Let's just streamline it down. We'll just call it Dr. Sizzle. Let's do that. It'll be way easier to remember.
Got it. That's way easier for me. Well, cool. Thanks for joining, Kurt. And I have a whole series of questions, a little background on these questions. Kurt and I were catching up the other day about how we run this segment. And I was saying, hey, Kurt, we're going to try to really focus. There's a lot of things at Wendy's we could talk about, but I really want to focus, given the nature of this conference, on the aspects that are retail and selling things to people and transactions and getting food to people in the easiest way and making that the most possible. Let's kind of focus there, okay? And Kurt said, John, that's literally all we think about all the time, 24/7. So yeah, check. But Kurt, that sounds like that's a better description of your job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our whole thing is, how do we get more people to show up at more Wendy's more often? And if we can do that job right, then all kinds of good things happen for the business, and everybody gets excited about the brand, and everybody performs better. The restaurants perform better, our franchisees do better, our company as a whole does better. So it's a real simple mission. It's just one that takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to get it right. But when you do, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, well, great lead in. Let's dive right in. I think the first question could sound like it's not a lot of fun, because we're going to go back to the start of the global pandemic. But, I think, in my opinion, Wendy's has been known for being agile, for being very connected with consumers, always has been, and gets more and more every year under your leadership. That had to have been tested last year. I mean, the entire world got hit by the pandemic, but I'd love to hear your firsthand experience of how Wendy's thought about it, your first reactions to what was happening. Obviously, none of us knew how long it would last, but how did Wendy's pivot? And Kurt, what were your memories of that? I know memories of bad word, because we're still in it to some degree, but how did Wendy's react?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was it's obviously been a heck of a year, and going through 2020 was crazy in a lot of different ways. If you think about where we were with our business, we had spent a number of years trying to figure out how to launch Wendy's into the breakfast game. We've been growing the business consistently year over year. People were loving the work we were doing on social media, connecting the brand, what was going on in our restaurants. We decided that we needed to get into another day part. So everything we were worried about going into 2020 was, how do we get breakfast launched? Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about that later, so I won't drain breakfast right now. But I think the heart of all of it was, we had a plan written to do one thing, and very quickly in the very beginning of the year, we had to completely change the plan. We had to dramatically reduce our marketing budget because we saw sales, drop overnight because of COVID and everybody being locked in or going to the grocery store. And our team with your team, with Spark, everybody else from the media agency side of things had to really come together to be able to rewrite a plan, which had to be rewritten day in and day out, just based on changing and evolving information all year long. We were super fortunate. The team did great work. We actually navigated through the back half of the year and had better results than we could have expected when we got into the middle of all this. But it went from one very big bet that we had related to getting into breakfast, and it transformed into a million small decisions that we had to make to be able to get through this all successfully, keep taking care of our crew members, take care of our customers, and we came through it all very successfully. But it was definitely not the way we drew it up.
Yeah, and speaking of, do you remember just leadership meetings, any anecdotes or just memories from the meetings, putting yourself back last March, what those meetings were like and what the there had to be a moment where you're looking into the storm. You're a retail business, and it's people have to go to Wendy's to get Wendy's. And do you remember anecdotes about the tonality of those meetings or just leaders sitting together facing that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was super scary. And it's funny, 2 weeks before we ended up closing our office, I vividly remember we were in a meeting talking about enabling remote work and whether or not we thought as a company we were ready to do that, to give a lot more flexibility to people on how they did things. And our loud and resounding answer was, we are not ready for that. That's not something that we believe we should be doing right now. And 2 weeks later, we closed the office. And that was, you just think about the transformation that it takes to do that, and the kinds of conversations that were going on at that time. We had to completely change how we did everything, and people were super scared. I watched our stock drop in one day, almost 50%, along with every other restaurant stock, because people didn't know what was going to happen. And what that meant. Everybody had to start doing things differently, and we had to role model things differently. But I started doing a lot of videos like this, system-wide videos to everybody in the company. And, that was not something I was in the habit of doing, or self-producing conversations. But what we found is that because we started to do those things, in many ways, our company, particularly out at the field level and at the restaurant level, they felt better connected than ever before to what we were communicating, what we were trying to get done. And so even though our office was closed and we were separated from that environment, the reality is our business takes place in the restaurants and it takes place in the field. And so we had to learn how to get connected much better than we ever had before. And we have had amazing feedback about how much more connected our people in the field and the restaurants feel than they ever did before. But it was scary and it was hard. You're talking to government officials trying to figure out if you're going to be an essential business or not. Are they going to let you keep the pickup window open or not? And those were not guaranteed. And, those were day by day kinds of conversations right from the very outset. And, they really carried on through the year, trying to figure out how to navigate our way through all of that. But it was definitely not the year we were expecting. But the thing that I loved with our whole Wendy's team is everybody just put their shoulder through it and said, we're going to make it through this one way or the other. Let's figure it out. And as a result, we're better for it. And we're way better together as a team than I think we ever were going into it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kurt. I remember there was a time during the pandemic we got together as teams in Kansas City, and I know what you mean. It was people hadn't seen each other in a while, but I think our teams felt like the connection. There was so much equity in the connection, but we found new ways to connect. You could feel it that night, and I remember that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, speaking of sharing,
sure. Well, let me just. Yeah. Sorry, I'll just add one more comment. You mentioned when we came out to Kansas City, and I love picturing the phone call that our chief marketing officer, Carl Laredo, had to make to your team when we found out that our suppliers weren't going to be able to supply us enough beef to stay in hamburgers. We are a hamburger restaurant, as you well know, and so obviously we sell other stuff. But Carl had to pick up the phone, call your team, talk through it, and say, "All right, time for some new advertising, gang. Let's figure out how to sell a lot more chicken, because we may not have enough hamburgers to supply America with what they want." And it was all those kinds of things like that where the teams came together, figured it out, and really navigated their way through it. It's unbelievable what people did to come together to be able to keep us in the game, to be able to stay connected, to be able to stay close in successful as a team. I mean, all those things were based on the relationships that we built in person. We had to live through the video environment, and I know we're going to get back to the other environment, but it's those relationships that really allowed all this to happen.
Yeah, well said. I think in the spirit of sharing, so I want to dive into all that and get into, you mentioned breakfast, I want to dive into launching a major, one of the most important launches in the history of Wendy's in a moment. But Kurt, you've always been a big advocate for bringing everything you are to work, and I know you encourage us as your agency to bring your personalities and get to know each other, and you do a lot of things, you and your team, to make sure we all know each other really well. I was thinking, you go to a lot of these conferences and it's just straight business and you don't get the chance to know the person you're talking to. I want people to get to know you a little bit. So instead of me drilling a bunch of questions, you're going to pick a couple questions for yourself now. This is going to transform into a game show all of a sudden for about every now and then, and we're going to go to a big board. Let's go to the board that we call the Guess Who board. Kurt hasn't seen these questions, these topics. And Kurt, this seems like a game show, but just as a warning, there's no prizes, there's no money coming out of this, so just to set your expectations. But anyway, 8 topics on the board, and have you pick one. And we'll just do this, every couple minutes between the serious questions. And I'll ask you something. They all have to do with your life in some way. Unless I was horribly misbriefed on something, I think they all have something to do with you. So, Kurt, there's the board. If you can see that, pick where you want to start. We'll dive right in.
How about get to the chopper? I'm fascinated at what that one might be.
I am too. That's why I'm going to go to my cards. And okay. So, and there's no right or wrong answer to this because there is no prize for you coming out of this. Okay, get to the chopper. It's this is about being the top of the food chain, all that. But tell me what an apex predator is and how that relates to Wendy's. This is something you're known for talking about. It's an attitude you bring. Talk about apex predator and what that relates to Wendy's.
Yeah, well, I think that is not the question I was expecting to come out of this category. So perfect. But no, I think we talk a lot about being you've got to be constantly aggressively going after business. And when we talk about being an apex predator, it's really all about what does it take to be the best performer, the best competitor in our category, so that everybody else knows that we're coming after their business. And I'm super passionate at Wendy's, and I think about it a lot at Wendy's, where we do a lot of things that we're super proud of related to the choices we make and the quality of our food, the quality of our ingredients. And transparently, I really believe a lot of our competitors don't do it the right way. So when we talk about being an apex predator, it's about going out and connecting with people in a way that people can't ignore, and that they really do understand that we are the best option and the best choice that's out there. So we lean in really hard on that. When we got into the business of launching breakfast, we ended up talking really about, and we used a lot of visuals about great white sharks and other kinds of things. But it was really all about, look, you know what, we're going to be the best competitor out there, and everybody else is going to. And this sounds awfully hostile, but I wanted everybody else to be afraid of what we were going to do at breakfast, and honestly, they are, and it's worked really well for us. So that's what being an apex predator is all about, and it's making sure that we're doing everything possible to take all the oxygen out of the room for everybody else, so that the business growth really comes our way.
I love the unapologetic view of competition that you always have, because I feel the same way, that you're just dancing around it if you act like we're in this for any other reason. We're here to compete and be the best companies we can be, and I think it motivates the team to know that we're not messing around here. This is a competition. So I appreciate that. Let's actually stay here. Like you, I didn't think that one correlated as much to the topic as I thought it was going to, but let's pick another one. So let's your choice, dealer's choice.
How about drink it up?
Okay. I think this is one that we're going to be very similar on. Drink it up. This is a little about your diet soda habits, and we share a huge love for Coke Zero. I remember it's sometimes hard to find Coke Zero. I get to your office one time, and you open the fridge, and it's loaded with Coke Zero. I think that's clearly your favorite kind of casual daytime beverage. But I want to talk about, what's your favorite adult beverage and why?
Well, I get made fun of all the time. My team actually calls me Nay sometimes, because I tend to enjoy just a glass of Chardonnay with dinner. And it's not the most macho choice, and it's not usually what people expect. But just a good old-fashioned glass of Chardonnay goes a long way.
Agreed. Okay, cool. Let's talk about breakfast for a second. Don't worry, we're coming back to the big board soon. But back to business. Breakfast, you mentioned it, and it was one of the biggest launches. I'm probably that you've ever involved. You've been involved in a lot of big launches, but the importance, the gravity of bringing breakfast back to Wendy's had enough gravity, let alone the pandemic. Love for you to double click into the importance of that launch, but more importantly, how you pivoted that launch and your emotions about and anxiousness about that and how that happened. And it was successful, and talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, breakfast is and has been an incredibly emotional topic for the Wendy's brand for a long time. Wendy's is over 50 years old. We should have been in breakfast successfully a long time ago, but for a million different reasons, just weren't able to figure it out. It was either too complicated, the food wasn't a right match, didn't work in the operating model. There were a million different reasons why breakfast hadn't worked. But one of the biggest reasons was we kept trying to put our toe in the water and test our way to find success in breakfast. And our competitors didn't want us to gain a foothold. So every time we'd go into a test market, they would tsunami those test markets with either free offers, media dollars that made our stuff look invisible. And so we could never prove our way to believing that breakfast would really be successful on a national level. So we got stuck. And what we really set about doing was figuring out how to get into breakfast. And the reason breakfast is so important from a business standpoint, particularly for our business, is we have a lot of fixed costs in our business. We have an asset that's sitting there. We've got real estate that we're paying for. We've got everything else already in place. But if you're not open for breakfast and you're flying by a bunch of closed Wendy's in the morning, we're losing an opportunity to really take advantage of the fixed assets that we have. So that's the simple business logic behind why we needed to make breakfast successful. And what we did was set about working with franchisees, talking with them about what hadn't worked in the past, and really just rolled up our sleeves around a completely new model that worked great for operations, had good food cost, most importantly, had really good, really craveable, really simple to execute food that people love. And that's what we set about really bringing into the world. So when you think about that, and we geared up for a launch, we have a massive media platform that we have through our partnership with the NCAA and March Madness. And we timed our launch for breakfast right around March Madness leading into the Final Four. And your team did some amazing creative work on the media side. We had amazing media plans. And we really called our shot on everything we were going to do around March Madness to launch breakfast. And then March Madness didn't happen at all. It got completely canceled. Yeah. So we had to go about, completely redeveloping a plan. And it was too late to pull back from launching breakfast because we'd already put it into the restaurant. So there was no pausing it. There was no holding on. We needed to move forward really directly to be able to engage in a big way. And so we had to come up with all kinds of new plans to be able to do it. But it was a gigantic bummer for everybody on the team initially, but everybody just got creative and figured it out.
Yeah, I remember from the agency side of that entire story, the production, how you produced work was changing so quickly at that time too. The fears on the agency side were, we've got a great idea, can we execute that? Can we film things? And don't have time to go into it, but I remember that being the dawn of how are we going to execute. And I think as an agency, it forced us to really get better about what is the idea. The idea has to matter, and it put some creativity into production as well. So I think that was on the agency side, that was an interesting angle that happened at that time.
No, it was. And if you think about even the whole tone of our launch, the earlier question asking about an apex competitor, it was all about gobbling up competitive business. But all of a sudden that tone didn't sound like it was going to be really on par with what was going on in the world. And people weren't going to be comfortable with that. And we had outdoor boards across the street from the McDonald's headquarters making fun of them on the way into work for why they should be ashamed of their breakfast. I mean, that's real. We had those up. Those were posted. They were fantastic. But at the end of the day, the tone of that had to change overnight because it just wasn't a message anybody was going to be receptive to. And so when you think about that, and there's actually an article that just came out. And actually, if you go online, there's Thrillist just did their Fasty Awards, and Wendy's was named the QSR Chain of the Year just yesterday. And one of the things they talked about was breakfast, and they rated our breakfast second out of 15 breakfasts that they evaluated in QSR. Which, since we've only been at this for a year, I'll take number 2 out of 15 right now. And we're just getting started. But we had to go through all that, get started, build a base of business. And what happened is that people really fell in love with our breakfast really quickly, because of the quality of the food experience, the way we were executing it. Our restaurants felt like they could execute it. So our whole model was built to be really resilient in the worst of times. Unfortunately, we had to live through that. But now it just means we have nothing but upside for our breakfast business because we already have a loyal base of customers who are coming out, at a time when breakfast mobility was at its lowest. So now that we know that, we know we can be successful with mobility at its lowest. We can only imagine how high the upside is when we actually get people back to living their regular lives again.
Yeah. Well, congrats on that. And for another conversation sometime, but I think Wendy's, and you're included, the confidence of a launch, even with a pandemic, it was so critical and something that hadn't been done for a long time or hadn't worked for a long time. And I appreciate that perseverance of this will work. We're not sure how it's going to work, but try to contain your excitement here because we're going to go back to the big board. And
all right. Well, before we go back to the big board, if I can just give a shout out to the entire VMLY&R team. I remember vividly going through the entire launch plan where all the creative was laid out. They already wrote all the headlines that we were going to get about our breakfast launch, from that creative and everything else that was going to happen. Plenty of awards were dialed into that because of the creative work, and we had a lot of confidence around it. But to go from that to completely redeveloping a plan that was as effective or even more effective and under much more difficult circumstances just speaks to the amazing people we've got on the Wendy's team at VML and Y&R. It's an amazing team. It's a team that dials in together and just really cares. So I don't even think about it as the VMLY&R team. I just think of it as the Wendy's team working together, and they deserve a huge shout out for making that successful.
Thanks, Kurt. That's the best compliment, is it feeling like one team, the way you said that. Just thank you. Okay, good. Well, so you're in charge. Let's knock off a couple of these, and then we'll get back to some other couple. We have time for a couple more questions after that. Where do you want to head?
All right. How about backhand compliments?
Okay. I think this one actually it lines up. We go to the cards. Well, you're going to see the connection as we go on this one, but you attended West Point Academy, right. something that people may not know about you, but maybe speak a little bit to West Point. But you attended West Point for a main reason, I'm told, and it has to do with that topic.
Yeah, sure. I got recruited to play tennis there. So I played competitive tennis when I was a junior all the way through high school, and then happened to catch the eye of the Army coach. And one thing led to another, and I was fortunate enough to get recruited, which opened a door that I'm not sure would have been open based on my academic performance in high school, but it did open a door in terms of the opportunity to go to West Point. And it was a great experience. Was in the Army after that as a result, but did not look much like a tennis court. I can tell you when I was stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, there was not a lot of tennis to be played, but it's definitely what opened the door for sure.
Did you grow up thinking you were going to go into the military, or that happened because of tennis? And then you said, hey, it's something I should consider.
No, I honestly, I always had a thought that I would. My father had been in the military. I had a bit of a military history. And it wasn't necessarily my only goal long term, but it was definitely something that was on my radar screen. And as I was applying to colleges, I applied for an ROTC scholarship as well, to be able to help pay for school. And in this case, it ended up working out that I went to West Point and didn't end up using the ROTC scholarship. But I always had a hunch that I would end up going into the Army one way or another.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Kurt, back. I want to go back to we were talking about the last year, and I was kind of kidding before that all our questions would be about selling things, but truly, I want to dive into that a little bit. In the last year, I know for a fact you've always thought about this way, but never more than the last year, the use of technology, partnerships, things that you hadn't done before, or things you were doing that you needed to amp up, technology or partnership-wise. Talk about some of that during the last year. It was key to a lot of success, and I imagine now part of the future going forward.
Yeah, well, I think this whole past year had just accelerated a lot of things that we were already working on. And you think about a restaurant that can't open its dining room, what happens? And it's not just Wendy's; that's every restaurant. Think about how if anybody watching this, if you were eating, how'd you go about doing that, and how different was that experience versus what it was weeks or months before? And there's a million great examples of people evolving and pivoting what they were doing. But for us, we closed the dining rooms down. We had to figure out how to engage better. Delivery became a lot more important, a lot quicker than we thought it would. And a lot of that came down to our mobile app and mobile technology playing a big role in that. We also had to get our delivery partners integrated into the Wendy's app so that we didn't send people off to one of the delivery providers to make their choice, but got them into the Wendy's app more directly. We launched a loyalty program in the middle of that to get people to use the app. So if you think about that, we launched Wendy's Rewards right in the middle of all this stuff going on. And that was something that had been kind of on the sidelines getting ready for a number of years. But we decided it was important to get it out there right away so that we could get people into the app and using that more directly. And there's a million other examples of how that all had to change to be able to engage. And probably the biggest way that we're thinking about it right now is if you think about a restaurant with a pickup window like a Wendy's, that is one way that has been the most convenient way to get food for a long time. But that's changing. And the way our team talks about it now is not how do we get people through the pickup window faster, but we keep talking about how do we turn our parking lots from parking lots into mobile transaction centers. Because it's not just about the pickup window. And if you've already placed an order, the last thing you want to do is get in a pickup window line when you've already placed your order and have to wait with everybody else. So how do we make that faster and easier with curbside pickup, with mobile grab and go where you can run in and grab your food already ready, sitting on a shelf? We just had a meeting about that today, and how we go even faster with that. And how do we, on top of that, make the pickup window move a lot faster so that if that's your preferred method, that you can get through that quickly too. So it really is all about creating transaction points rather than just the one transaction point of the pickup window, and how do we make that faster and easier for everybody.
Yeah, it's great because I think you said a lot there, but I think we're all learning the lesson. A lot of things that were born in the last year that are going to be an embedded part of how you do business going forward. And as horrible as the pandemic's been, there's some real positives that come out of it, including everything you just said about the way you'll do business going forward.
And nobody's going back.
Yeah.
Nobody's going back. Customers have learned all this. They know what they prefer, and it's all about being, fast and smooth and easy for them. And the number one word that we talk about is frictionless. How do we remove friction from this process so it's easier for people? And at the same time, how do we make it more frictionless for our crew members to execute these processes? Because for them, if it's difficult, they're not going to lean into it. So we got to make it easier for our crew members in the restaurants. But we got to make it easier for our customers because there's no going back from here.
Agreed. Well, we don't have time for much more, but we're not going to let you out of here without going deep into the big board one more time. So let's finish there. Back to the board. You've got 4 things left. Pick one. Pick a good one. I don't know which ones are good.
How about hard pass?
Okay. Easy one. You love all of Wendy's food, I know, but what kind of sandwich would you rather not taste at Wendy's?
A sandwich that Wendy's makes that I would rather not taste? Fish. So I am not a fish fan of any form. If it swims, I run away from it. So that is not my favorite option. But crawling into a Dave's Double is a big idea. I love all of our hamburgers, chicken sandwiches. I've got a giant sweet tooth, so I love finishing off with a chocolate chunk cookie whenever humanly possible. So I'm right down the middle on our core menu all the time.
Yeah. I think it's one of the reasons we get along so well. I would have chosen fish myself. I'll never eat it. But no, that's great, Kurt. I think a couple things. First of all, thank you for joining us. I'll follow up with you on the prizes that you earned on the big board. You did a great job. And in more seriousness, this whole conference, Kurt, has been about it's about commerce, and it's about transformation of commerce, and so many great theories and examples. But in the last 30 minutes, you've brought to life in the real trenches of a real business out there, as Thrill has said, the best in the business. And congratulations on all of it. And thanks for sharing all the detail of it. It's really helpful, especially in this conference. We're trying to, share examples of people out there doing it. Congratulations on all of it. Thanks, Kurt.
No, I appreciate it, John. And again, a huge shout out to your team. You helped us launch $1 billion breakfast business in the middle of a pandemic when nobody was leaving their home and taking off their bunny slippers in the morning. So you think about that, think about the overall sales growth we've had as a company over the past 5 years. I know that you and I have had the opportunity to work together as a team, and it's unbelievable. And we're just getting started. I couldn't be more passionate about our partnership and the work that we're doing, and really appreciate everything that the team puts into it every day because it shines through. and it's beyond fun to get to work on it together.
Thanks, Kurt.